Let my mother go. The boy's voice cut through the courtroom, sharp enough to stop every movement, calm enough to sound impossible coming from a 12-year-old. He was standing in front of the judge. The judge was sitting in power. And his mother was already being treated as guilty. The injustice was immediate and visible. A child was speaking. The system was laughing. Then he added one sentence, quietly. And I will make you walk again. The room froze. Judge William Carter, paralyzed for 8 years after a car accident, stopped flipping through documents and slowly raised his eyes, unsure whether he had just been mocked or challenged. The silence lasted only a moment before laughter exploded across the courtroom, careless and cruel. Prosecutors exchanged amused looks. Reporters leaned forward, already tasting the spectacle of a poor black child daring to speak out of turn. That kid has lost his mind, a woman in the gallery whispered, shaking her head as if the ending was already obvious. Kevin Washington did not react. He stood beside his mother, small in stature but steady, watching faces instead of listening to laughter. Deborah Washington stood accused behind him. For 15 years she had worked as a janitor in that same courthouse, cleaning offices after hours, learning which doors mattered and which faces never noticed her. Now she was charged with embezzlement. $50,000 had vanished from the administrative safe, and the explanation offered was simple, convenient, and cruel. She had access. She was poor. She was black. While the room laughed, Kevin observed. He noted who enjoyed the humiliation, who avoided his mother's eyes, who smiled too quickly. He was not there to beg for mercy. He was there because the decision had already been made, and he understood exactly what that meant. Judge Carter leaned forward, irritation sharpening his voice. This is a serious courtroom, not a circus. Your mother is guilty. There are no miracles here. The laughter returned, louder now, as if the judge had given permission to humiliate. Kevin met his gaze without blinking. I know who stole the money, he said, quietly but clearly. And I know how to prove it. For a heartbeat, silence tried to return. Then someone mocked him from the back, and the laughter came again, harsher this time. Kevin allowed himself a small smile, empty of humor. First you release my mother, he said evenly. Then I will show you how you will walk again. No one noticed the small digital recorder hidden inside his backpack. No one noticed how his eyes lingered on Judge Carter's assistant, Thomas Mitchell, whose laughter stopped abruptly the moment Kevin spoke. And no one in that courtroom imagined that this boy had spent the last 6 months watching them, listening carefully, memorizing patterns, waiting for the exact moment when being underestimated would become their greatest mistake. The laughter did not stop. It grew louder, sharper, fed by the confidence of a system that felt untouchable. Judge Carter leaned back in his chair, the sound of amusement settling comfortably around him, as if the child's words had already been erased. This court will not tolerate a circus, he said, striking the gavel harder than necessary. His eyes stayed fixed on Kevin, not curious, not cautious, but dismissive, the look of someone reminding a child where power truly lives. Your mother had access to the safe. The money is gone. That is enough. The words landed like a verdict already written. Kevin felt the room close in. He could hear his mother's breathing behind him, shallow and uneven, the sound of someone being crushed slowly, in public, with no way to stop it. He spoke anyway. My mother has worked here for 15 years without a single complaint. Why would she steal now? The prosecutor answered before the judge could. Because people like her always steal when they get the chance. It's in their nature. The sentence cut deeper than the laughter. Some faces shifted. A few eyes dropped. No one objected. The silence wrapped itself around the insult, turning it into something heavier. Judge Carter did nothing to stop it. Instead, he nodded slightly, as if the explanation made sense. Poverty is motive enough, he said. Case closed. The gavel struck again. Kevin's chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. He had heard those words before, in different places, from different mouths, always carrying the same message. You are already guilty. He looked toward Thomas Mitchell without meaning to. The judge's assistant sat rigid, fingers tapping the desk too fast, his eyes fixed on the surface in front of him, avoiding Deborah's face. Kevin noticed. Details mattered now. My mother didn't steal that money, Kevin said again, louder this time. And I can prove it. Someone laughed openly. With what, kid? Crayons. Judge Carter leaned forward, irritation turning into cruelty. Do you think you can walk in here and change reality with childish fantasies? Your mother is a thief. Accept it and save us all time. The words were not just judgment. They were a warning. Kevin inhaled slowly, steadying himself, understanding something important in that moment. This was no longer about evidence. It was about power being used, openly, without fear of consequence. Are you sure you want to continue like this, Your Honor? He asked calmly. Carter narrowed his eyes. What are you implying? Kevin held his gaze. That when I prove my mother is innocent, this courtroom will not look the same. The laughter faltered, just for a second. Not because they believed him, but because certainty, when challenged without fear, always leaves a crack. The order came without hesitation. Guards, remove the boy from the courtroom. The words landed hard, final, and for the first time since Kevin had spoken, the threat became physical. 2 guards shifted near the aisle, ready to act, ready to make the child disappear and restore the balance of power. Kevin did not move. 6 months, he said. The guards hesitated. The room hesitated with them. 6 months watching everyone in this courtroom, listening when you thought I couldn't hear, noticing what you believed a child would never understand. Judge Carter tightened his grip on the armrests, his authority challenged in a way he did not expect. Enough, he snapped. This ends now. Kevin turned his head slightly, not toward the judge, but toward the people seated behind him, the ones who had been laughing only moments before. You think kids are invisible, he said calmly. You think we don't hear what you say when you stop pretending to be fair. The consequence was immediate. Thomas Mitchell stiffened. His fingers began tapping against the desk, too fast, out of rhythm, betraying a tension his face could no longer hide. Kevin noticed the change instantly, the way fear slipped through the cracks when pressure was applied. Kevin looked directly at him. 6 months of listening, he continued. 6 months of watching who gets nervous when money is mentioned. Who avoids my mother's eyes. Who stops laughing at the wrong moment. Mitchell swallowed. Before the judge could interrupt again, a voice cut through the room from the back, sharp and unignorable. The boy is right. Every head turned. A woman stepped forward from the last row, her movements controlled, confident, as if she had already decided how this would unfold. She walked down the aisle without hesitation, heels striking the floor with purpose. Patricia Williams, she said, holding up her credentials. New York Bar Association. I represent the Washington family. The pressure shifted instantly. The prosecutor's face drained of color. The laughter vanished completely. The courtroom no longer felt safe for anyone who had relied on certainty. How did you hear about this case? The prosecutor asked, his voice unsteady. A very intelligent young man contacted me 3 weeks ago, Patricia replied, her eyes briefly meeting Kevin's. Kevin remembered the call clearly. His hands had been shaking then, not with fear, but with urgency. He had not begged. He had presented facts. Show me what you have, she had said. And now, standing in the courtroom, the consequence of that call was unfolding in real time. Judge Carter leaned forward again, but this time the control in his voice was forced. This court has already decided. Patricia did not slow down. Federal law allows new evidence when there is reasonable suspicion of judicial error rooted in racial prejudice. She placed a document on the bench. The room fell silent. Pressure had replaced certainty. The balance of the room shifted. What had once felt untouchable now felt exposed, and everyone could sense it. Judge Carter tightened his jaw as Patricia Williams stepped closer to the bench, her presence cutting through the last traces of certainty. Your Honor, she said calmly, I formally request the reopening of the investigation into the missing $50,000. The courtroom reacted instantly. Murmurs spread. Heads turned. The word reopening landed like a crack in the foundation. Denied, Carter replied sharply. This case has already been decided. Patricia did not step back. Federal law allows new evidence to be presented when there is reasonable suspicion of judicial error based on racial prejudice. She placed a document on the bench. The sound it made was small, but the effect was not. Thomas Mitchell shifted in his chair. Kevin saw it. Not a dramatic movement. Just enough to notice. A shoulder tightening. A breath held too long. The kind of reaction that comes from someone who knows attention is no longer safe. Mr. Mitchell, Kevin said quietly, do you really want to leave right now? Mitchell froze. After working so closely with the judge, Kevin continued, wouldn't you want to stay and hear who really stole that money? The pressure landed hard. Patricia turned toward Mitchell, her voice steady. Perhaps you could explain something for the court. How does a court clerk earning $45,000 a year manage to purchase a $300,000 house in cash? Silence swallowed the room. Mitchell's face lost its color. His hands gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Judge Carter struck the gavel again, louder than before. Order. But order did not return. Kevin took a slow breath. My mother trusted me, he said. She told me the combination to the safe. Only 3 people knew it. Every word narrowed the space. My mother. The judge. And Mr. Mitchell. Patricia opened another folder. Kevin, she said, tell the court what you discovered about the security cameras. Kevin lifted his eyes. The hallway cameras have blind spots, he said. But the parking lot camera doesn't. It records anyone who enters the building after hours. He turned toward Mitchell. Do you remember the night of March 15th? A Friday. 11:47 p.m. Mitchell's chair scraped the floor as he stood abruptly. I need to use the restroom. The sentence came too fast. Before anyone could respond, the courtroom doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped inside. Mr. Mitchell, one of them said evenly, we need to speak with you regarding your recent financial activity. Mitchell did not answer. He did not need to. The first truth had surfaced, and it was already pulling everything else with it. As Thomas Mitchell was escorted out of the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted completely. The laughter that once filled the room had disappeared, replaced by a heavy silence that felt impossible to escape. Kevin watched every reaction carefully. He saw the prosecutor shuffle his papers as if they could protect him, saw Judge Carter gripping the arms of his wheelchair until his knuckles turned white, and saw his mother staring in disbelief, unsure whether to hope or brace herself for another disappointment. Kevin turned toward the judge. Do you still think my mother stole the money? He asked quietly. For the first time since the trial began, Judge Carter did not answer immediately. His authority felt smaller now, exposed under the weight of facts that refused to stay hidden. Patricia stepped forward again. Your Honor, based on the evidence presented, I formally request the immediate acquittal of Deborah Washington and the opening of a federal investigation into this court for civil rights violations. The courtroom buzzed with shock. Reporters stood up, cameras flashing, sensing that something far bigger than a simple theft case was unfolding. Judge Carter tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Kevin did not look away from him. It is not over yet, Kevin said. There is more. Patricia opened another folder, thicker than the others, and placed it carefully on the table. Kevin, she said, show the court what you found. Kevin reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, worn laptop. He connected it to the courtroom sound system with steady hands, as if he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. For 6 months, Kevin began, his voice echoing clearly through the room, I recorded everything. Every conversation. Every joke. Every comment you thought no one would hear. Judge Carter's face went pale. The first recording played. Blacks always steal when they get the chance. It is in their nature. A second voice followed, unmistakable. Exactly. That is why we do not need to investigate too deeply. We already know the outcome. Gasps filled the courtroom. The words hung in the air, undeniable, impossible to explain away. Patricia did not interrupt. She let the truth speak for itself. Kevin clicked to the next file without hesitation. These black cases are always the same. Guilty until proven innocent. It saves the court time. Nervous murmurs rippled through the room as the recording continued, followed by laughter that now sounded grotesque in its cruelty. Kevin selected another audio clip. That kid thinks he can come in here and play lawyer. A janitor's son trying to be smart. I will show him his place. Judge Carter's face turned red. He tried to stand, tried to interrupt, but Patricia raised a hand, stopping him. There is more, she said calmly. Kevin played another recording. Single black women always make excuses. They are all the same. The courtroom erupted. Reporters pushed forward. Cameras flashed relentlessly. There was no longer any doubt about what kind of system had been operating behind closed doors. These recordings have already been sent to the National Council of Magistrates, the national press, and the FBI, Patricia said. This court is now under federal review. Carter's voice trembled. That was taken out of context. Private conversations. Kevin looked at him with the same calm focus he had shown from the beginning. Do you want me to play the one where you said you would teach that arrogant black family a lesson? Carter froze. Patricia turned toward the prosecutor. Mr. Davidson, do you remember saying that black people need to learn to stay in their place or society will fall apart? April 3rd. 2:37 p.m. Davidson looked down, unable to respond. The destruction was systematic, not emotional, not rushed. 6 months of quiet observation had become a precise dismantling of power, exposing patterns of bias that could no longer be denied. Patricia stood tall. Based on this evidence, I formally request the full acquittal of Deborah Washington and the immediate suspension of all parties involved pending federal investigation. The courtroom, once a place of laughter and certainty, now stood frozen, confronted with the cost of its own silence. As Judge Carter struggled to process the collapse of everything he believed secure, a strange sensation began to spread through his legs. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, like a distant echo, but then it grew into something undeniable. Kevin noticed it immediately. Your Honor, he said quietly, are you feeling something different? Carter looked down, confusion replacing arrogance. His toes moved inside his shoes, a motion so small yet so impossible that the room fell silent again, stunned by what it was witnessing. Doctors would later debate the cause. Some would call it coincidence. Others would speak of extreme stress unlocking something long dormant in the nervous system. But in that moment, no explanation mattered. For the first time in 8 years, Judge William Carter could move his legs. The courtroom stood frozen as Carter slowly pushed himself up, his movements shaky, uncertain, supported by the table in front of him. There was no applause. No celebration. Only the heavy understanding that this moment was not a victory, but a reckoning. I told you I would make you walk, Kevin said softly. I never said how. Carter stood there, exposed, surrounded by cameras, stripped of the authority that once defined him. His recovery, which should have been a miracle, now felt like the physical symbol of his complete humiliation. Deborah Washington collapsed into tears, not from fear, but from relief, as Patricia wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Kevin remained still, watching everything unfold with the same calm he had carried from the beginning. There was no triumph in his expression, only certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the truth has finally caught up with power. Justice had not arrived loudly. It had arrived quietly, through patience, observation, and the refusal to stay silent. As Judge Carter struggled to process the collapse of everything he believed secure, a strange sensation began to spread through his legs. At first it was faint, barely noticeable, like a distant echo, but then it grew into something undeniable. Kevin noticed it immediately. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "are you feeling something different?" Carter looked down, confusion replacing arrogance. His toes moved inside his shoes, a motion so small yet so impossible that the room fell silent again, stunned by what it was witnessing. Doctors would later debate the cause. Some would call it coincidence. Others would speak of extreme stress unlocking something long dormant in the nervous system. But in that moment, no explanation mattered. For the first time in 8 years, Judge William Carter could move his legs. The courtroom stood frozen as Carter slowly pushed himself up, his movements shaky, uncertain, supported by the table in front of him. There was no applause. No celebration. Only the heavy understanding that this moment was not a victory, but a reckoning. "I told you I would make you walk," Kevin said softly. "I never said how." Carter stood there, exposed, surrounded by cameras, stripped of the authority that once defined him. His recovery, which should have been a miracle, now felt like the physical symbol of his complete humiliation. Deborah Washington collapsed into tears, not from fear, but from relief, as Patricia wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Kevin remained still, watching everything unfold with the same calm he had carried from the beginning. There was no triumph in his expression, only certainty, the kind that comes from knowing the truth has finally caught up with power. Justice had not arrived loudly. It had arrived quietly, through patience, observation, and the refusal to stay silent. 1 year after the trial, Kevin was invited onto a national television program. The host asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "How did you know you could prove your mother's innocence?" Kevin smiled slightly, the same calm expression that had unsettled a courtroom full of adults. "I did not know," he answered honestly. "I only knew I had to try. My mother taught me that when you see injustice, you have 2 choices. You accept it, or you fight it. Accepting it was never an option." The interviewer hesitated before asking the question that still fascinated the public. "And the judge walking again. How do you explain that?" Kevin paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes the body reacts when the truth is finally faced. Judge Carter lived believing his own lies for so long that the shock of reality released something trapped inside him. It was not magic. It was consequence. Far away from the cameras and the applause, William Carter watched the interview from a small rented apartment. His legs worked perfectly now, but his life had collapsed. He could walk, but he had nowhere left to go. Every step reminded him that the cure he received came at the cost of everything he valued. His career. His authority. His sense of control. The irony was impossible to ignore. Today, Kevin Washington is 15 years old and attends one of the best private schools in the country on a full scholarship. His future, once limited by prejudice and poverty, now stretches open with possibility. His mother purchased her own home using the compensation awarded for moral damages. A place built not only on justice served, but on dignity restored. Patricia Williams continues to mentor Kevin, and together they have helped dozens of families who face discrimination similar to Deborah's. Each case reinforces the lesson that truth, when documented and defended, can dismantle even the most protected systems. Thomas Mitchell serves his sentence in a federal prison, known among inmates as the man who framed an innocent woman. The reputation followed him there, a reminder that some consequences cannot be escaped. Prosecutor Davidson lives quietly, avoiding any mention of his past, his former authority reduced to a cautionary tale. And William Carter walks alone through streets where no one recognizes him. His legs are strong now, but the weight he carries is heavier than paralysis ever was. Every step is a reminder that power abused eventually collapses under its own lies. Kevin's story did not become legendary because he made the impossible happen, but because he proved something far more unsettling. True strength does not come from position or authority. It comes from patience, intelligence, and the courage to stand for the truth when silence feels safer. In a world where injustice often wins by being ignored, a 12-year-old boy showed that even the smallest voice, when guided by determination and humanity, can force giants to face their own defeat.